Mizzou at Alabama. It's an SEC matchup, 7:30 Eastern. Alabama's a 13.5-point favorite on their home field, over under set at 55.5. We're all fully aware of the turmoil that has gone on over the last few weeks at Alabama, as you know, the team just has not obviously played up to expectations, played up to the legacy that was left behind by their legendary, goat of a coach, Nick Saban. And it's like I said, it's caused a ton of turmoil there in Alabama. Lots of people are on Kalen DeBoer's ass. A lot of people are on these players' ass on this team. And honestly, Mason, you can kind of where they're not so much in the spotlight. I will say that they're not as much in the spotlight, but Missouri's been a disappointment this season too so far. Both of these teams, I think, have played below expectations. Both of these teams, it's really kind of last call for both of them. Mizzou doesn't have a very tough schedule the rest of the way. Many people are not really talking about Mizzou right now as being a playoff contender or anything like that. That can all change with a win here, Mason. That can all change if Mizzou comes out this weekend and shows us what we thought we were going to see in the preseason. Let's jump into some of this, and I'll tell you right now. This is all going to have to do with Brady Cook in this football game. If Mizzou's going to win this thing, Brady Cook's got to play better than what we've seen him play. And we've heard the Missouri fans talking about him being banged up and things like that. And I don't know if that's true. I don't know. I think he went out for a little bit last week, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he's hurt or not. But for Mizzou to win this football game, he's a big piece of the puzzle because somebody's got to be able to get the ball to these playmakers for Missouri. Let's jump into this thing, and we'll talk about the offense of Missouri first. It's the numbers seem to get worse as the season goes on, and it hasn't been a murderer's row of a schedule necessarily. Now, we all remember the Texas A&M game there a couple of weeks ago. Missouri just couldn't do anything correctly in that game. I mean, everything that they did was wrong. Everything. I mean, hit a big play, penalty, right? Get a blitz, get after the quarterback. Oh, it's around the edge already. It was just it was a comedy of errors for Missouri in that football game. I don't think we can expect Missouri to play that bad, right? And I say it all the time. College football is one of those things you can't overreact. That was the worst of Missouri, I feel like, that we saw. Have we seen a version of Missouri that's best case scenario that we thought in the preseason? I don't think we've seen that this year. Got to figure out a way to stretch the field, give these running backs a little bit of room. Alabama doesn't have the best secondary in the world. Got to get Theo Weiss and got to get Luther Burden involved from the get-go. I saw in that Texas A&M game, Mason, I went back and watched it today. Missouri had a ton of vertical passing routes in that game. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And they didn't make any adjustments. Nothing changed from first half to second half, in my opinion. Maybe threw it a little more, maybe ran it a little less because you were so far behind. But it was the vertical passing and passing plays that were taking way too long to develop. Texas A&M was eating up Brady Cook in the backfield. I mean, he couldn't. He was uncomfortable in the pocket the whole time. I don't think Alabama is quite as good at getting after the quarterback as what Texas A&M was. I'm interested to see if the offensive coordinator for Missouri and Coach Drink are able to come up with some type of plan to get the ball out of Brady Cook's hands quicker. They've got to figure out a way to get it out quicker, stretch the field laterally, and then every once in a while take the deep shot. It feels like this team has been a little bit too much in love with trying to force the ball down the field. And I understand why they're doing it. Like I said, there's some good wide receivers here. But I think that you've got to figure out another element and another way to supplement the passing game and supplement the run game through the short passing game. What do you think about the offense this season for Missouri? It's really just kind of been a mind F, if you really think about it.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. I mean, we had really high expectations for this offense in particular going into the football season this year. We did a Missouri breakdown early in the year, and it really felt like this team was going to get better on offense, right? And we haven't seen that. It's been a step back for the most part. They're lacking in the explosive plays. They have had a pretty good running game, I would say. Um, but ultimately, I think that a lot of the pressure has fallen on Brady Cook, and rightfully so. But this team has been heavily penalized as well. And I think that they have a lot of things to clean up. Now, on the flip side, they're facing Alabama, which is, I mean, we saw them get 15 penalties against them or on them against Tennessee this past week. So not exactly the cleanest football being played in T-Town either. But I'm wondering if Missouri can play a complete game, and which they did against UMass, but nobody was paying attention to that football game. Nobody cares that you blew out UMass. That's not nobody's going to give you credit for that. You're not getting a pat on the back or anything like that. Can they do it against an SEC team, right? Can they do it when their backs up against the walls? They don't have another game on their schedule that they can point to after this Alabama game where they can say we deserve to be in the playoffs even at 2 losses, right? If they lose to Alabama this week and win out the rest of the year, there's not another game on the schedule, and a lot of that is going to depend on the offense. I think defensively they've been pretty good, which we'll get to the defense here in a minute. But the pressure is all on the offense, and a lot of it's on Brady Cook. He has not been good. He's completing just over 50% of his passes. We did see him go out last week against Auburn. He was out for about a half of football, I guess. Seems like he went to the locker room and they just completely rebuilt him there in the locker room, because he came back out in the fourth quarter, got with his guys and said, "Hey, where are we at? You know, what's going on here?" Jumped in there and won them the football game, which was pretty impressive. I really felt like Auburn had that one in the bag, and hey, Brady looked like a different Brady that we know, who comes out and takes souls in the fourth quarter. That's what Brady Cook looked like at the end of that football game. If he can replicate what he did in the fourth quarter last week for an entire football game, I think that they got a shot. But it is a long shot when you look at their whole body of work on the offensive side of the football so far this year. Not really liking what I'm seeing, and at the same time, I'll say that they have not played a complete football game on that side of the football yet either.
Yep. Let's talk about the defense. It's been pretty good, and look, it hasn't been flashy. That was kind of what we talked about earlier in the season. It hasn't necessarily been a flashy defense, right? Not a ton of sacks this season. 46 in the country with 16. Been pretty good at keeping plays in front of them, not letting too many plays get behind them. We saw a lot of long runs against Texas A&M, but other than that, this season it's been a sound defense. Corey Batoon obviously comes in, takes over for Blake Baker, who went over to LSU in the offseason. That was a big loss for Missouri, right? I don't know any other way to put that. I don't think Corey Batoon has done a bad job. Don't get me wrong, but Blake Baker was a commodity, and Mizzou wasn't able to hold on to him, and that's just kind of how it goes in Division One, and guys move around and things. But look at these numbers. I mean, pass yards per game allowed 127.3. That's outstanding, right? Haven't faced a ton of good offenses though, Mason. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. We saw them face Texas A&M, and I wouldn't at the time. Okay, Texas A&M has gotten a whole lot better. I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but at the time, we didn't look at Texas A&M's offense and say, "Wow, this is really explosive." Now, as we said, Texas A&M is kind of an enigma as far as offensively, but when we've seen this team face an offense with a pulse, it hadn't been that great. But there hasn't been that many teams that have been able to test them, if that makes any sense. I think Alabama is going to be able to test this defense pretty much unlike anybody has this season, especially being on the road there at Alabama. What do you think about the defense in this spot? We know what Alabama wants to do, Mason. They want to they want to run the football. They've got a good running football team. They got a good offensive line, and they've got 3 guys that at any moment could take off and bust one. And not to mention they're very tough runners at that. And then Alabama likes to hit a play every once in a while over the top. to their 17-year-old. If y'all didn't know, he's 17. Um, Ryan Williams there. So, what do you think about this defense for Missouri this season? You lose some guys from last year to the NFL. You lose your defensive coordinator. So, with all that being said, and all intents and purposes, I think the defense has played as well as one could really want, minus that Texas A&M game, I guess.
Yeah, and a lot of the Texas A&M game, I put on the offense. I mean, you gave up 41 points. The offense only scored 10. Like they couldn't
Yeah.
do anything offensively. It kept the defense out there to dry. They didn't have a great game plan anyways, and I think the game just got really fast for that defense. They kind of got caught up in a blender, in other words. And I don't think that this game will play out like the A&M game did for Missouri because Alabama does not have the same type of defense that Texas A&M has. So I think you could see it. I think you could see the defense getting their feet under them a little bit more, getting a little bit of a breath here and there. But make no mistake, the offense for Alabama is better than Texas A&M's. So if Alabama's not shooting themselves in the foot with penalties and things like that, it could also that could be the reason why Alabama puts up 41 or more, similar to the Texas A&M game. But as far as the offense for Missouri going against the defense of Alabama, I do think that they're going to be able to extend drives, and that'll take a lot of the pressure off of this defense for Missouri, which could help them out in the long run. But my question is the running game. I think that Alabama has a really good running game that they haven't utilized well enough or enough in general, but I think they're very efficient. Does Alabama lean on the run game in this game? And with that being a weakness of Missouri, is that the reason why Alabama's able to score more? We'll have to wait and see. But since I talked about the run game for Alabama, I mean, you can look at their rushing yards per game. They're averaging 164.29 yards per game. That's not bad, but it's 59th in the country, which is a lot lower than you would expect to see from an Alabama team, especially with the two running backs that they have. I still have a lot of respect for both of those running backs and the offensive line, which we thought going in that these offensive linemen are really good as far as in the run game as run blocking offensive linemen, and they haven't been utilized very much. They haven't really had a chance to get going in the run game. It's kind of an enigma in my opinion. We've seen Kalen DeBoer's offenses be like sneaky good in the run game. Like, last year with Washington, nobody really noticed, but they had one of the best running teams in the country. And this year it seems like they have all the pieces. They're just not doing it. So I'm wondering if the game plan doesn't switch a little bit for Alabama this week on the offensive side of the football. Run Jalen Milroe more, get behind Justice Haynes and Jam Miller a little bit more, and just kind of slow the game down. Let this team gel a little bit and figure some things out. Maybe that's the offensive approach. I would be here to see it. I know you got Ryan Williams. I know you got Jeremy Bernard. Not a lot of pass catching weapons outside of those two, though. So maybe you play to your personnel a little bit better in this football game. Play to your strength, what could be your strength, I guess, and then you're also on offense. You're playing to Missouri's weakness on defense, which is their rush defense. And but you said it. I mean, Missouri hasn't faced an offense like Alabama's this year. I think that the Alabama offense is probably going to eat in this football game, and I'm just curious to see what that looks like. Is it going to be through the air, or do they get more involved in the run game this week?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said it perfect, and we've talked about this Alabama offense ad nauseum this season, as every show has. So I'm not going to sit here and just go crazy with the stats or whatnot, but Alabama, it takes shot plays through the air, right? And I think they've got to get back to kind of the nitty gritty of their offense, and that's running the football here in this football game. And we'll, the total. I forgot what the total was. It was kind of high in this game, so it seems like Vegas and the public perception of this game is that it's going to be higher scoring. And I don't know. I might bet that back the other way come Thursday because I'm interested to see. I think that Alabama is going to be trying to run the football, play some keep away. Let's talk about that Alabama defense. I mean, like I said, we've talked about the offense ad nauseum. Um, it's been a defense that they're not good in the secondary, okay, but they get turnovers, right? They are not good in the secondary. They're very young, a mismatched, group of guys. Just a bunch of you got Malachi Moore, who's like the coach of the team, essentially, I guess, and then you've got like some freshmen and some transfer guys. Damani Jackson coming over from USC, who's a decent piece. But like I said, they give up a ton of yards, but they get some turnovers, right? And that's kind of been the mantra of this defense this season, especially through the air. Mizzou's got to figure out a way to take advantage of what this defense gives them and be able to get the ball over the top of this defense if they've got a shot to win this football game. And Mizzou has not been able to consistently do that season, so I don't have a ton of faith in them to do that. You see 107th in the country opponent pass plays of 30+ yards. Alabama's given up 11 of them. Now, 5 or 6 of those were to Georgia in the second half of that game. So you make of that number what you will. But really, really good on third down. That kind of worries me. Now, Missouri on offense, we talked about some of the statistics. Probably their best and highest rated statistic is third down conversions, believe it or not. So they've got a couple of running backs that have helped them to stay ahead of the chains for the most part, be able to convert around 50% of their third downs. So gonna have to see more of that from Missouri. It's the explosiveness that's been missing from their offense. And Alabama presents a defense that has been susceptible to explosive plays. What do you think about the Alabama defense this season? I think their strength really lies in that linebacker room. Deontay Lawson has had an unbelievable season, like 61 tackles this year, played really well. Malachi Moore, obviously one of the leaders of this team. We've there's a lot that's going on, going on with Malachi Moore this season and his relationship with that coaching staff. So you make of that what you will. Maybe that's for a different video. But what do you think about the defense this season and what Kane Womack has been able to put out on the field?
Well, I thought it started off really strong. It seems like ever since the second half of that Georgia game, this defense has not really found itself. Um, Not saying it was Georgia that caused the stirrings or whatever, but we saw them struggle against Vandy, of course. I saw them struggle against South Carolina in some cases. It seemed like they couldn't tackle Rocket Sanders in that game. And then looked really good against Tennessee in that first half. Got some key turnovers, and that's one thing that the Alabama defense has been really good at is getting the takeaways. They've gotten interceptions, they've forced fumbles. They have been really good at that, but how long is that going to last? I mean, can you really expect to get 2 and 3 turnovers a game?
Right.
At some point you're going to need to get a turnover on downs. You know what I mean? You're gonna need to force some 3 and outs to win some football games. And Alabama just has not been what we've come to expect from this Alabama defense this season. And a lot of that's really up front. I mean, I thought that they would be much better on the defensive line than they have been. It seems like they're struggling to get a pass rush in a lot of cases, and at times even struggling to stop the run. So. It's a very mid defense, like in the SEC by Alabama standards in all aspects. I think that they're really doing some soul searching right now to figure out what that identity is on the defensive side of the football.
Well, and one thing that I'd like to point out, and this will probably piss some people off if they hear it. Maybe some people agree with it or whatever. Alabama fans, I'm speaking about. I've noticed that this Alabama team, they do one thing in the first half, and it seems to be kind of what they stick with the entire game. I haven't seen Alabama go into halftime and be able to make adjustments worth a damn in any
On
of these
either
football
side
games
of
on either side of the ball.
football. Yeah.
And you know what that is? That's a sign of not very good coaching. I mean, that is what that is. Is Kane Womack over his head, at Alabama? He was obviously a former head coach there at South Alabama, and just this is his biggest moment of his career. This is his biggest spot of his career. Um, I haven't seen this coaching staff outcoach any teams that they played this season. Now, you could say that Alabama had a lot better plan in the first half of the Georgia game, but then you saw Georgia come back and should have won that game in the second half. I mean, let's be real. Georgia had that game won with less than 2 minutes left and then blew it defensively. So, uh, this team hasn't been able to make adjustments in the second half of games, and I think that does tell us something about the coaching staff that's on hand at Alabama. Look, I'm not touching this line this weekend. I'll just be honest with you. You guys can tune into the Thursday betting show. Maybe we'll have an alt play on this. Maybe I'm thinking more of playing the over and under. I'm gonna look a little bit more into that number of 55.5. I see that it's trending downward this week. It's come down 1 point already. It was 56.5 to start. Now it's down to 55.5. So I see some people betting it under. That's what I would bet if I was betting as far as this game. But as far as their predictions go, I guess I'm taking Alabama to cover here, and I think 14 is like the perfect number, honestly. Mizzou just hasn't showed me anything, Mason. I haven't seen enough from Mizzou to stick my neck out and say Mizzou can go on the road and beat Alabama. I just haven't seen that. And while this is Alabama that is a shell of its former self, I think this is a Mizzou team that's a shell of its former self from last year. And I like Alabama, I think, to cover here just barely. Wouldn't surprise me if they didn't cover. In all honesty, I would love for Missouri to win this football game. That would honestly make my day. I wouldn't mind that a bit. But I just don't see it happening. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that Vegas throwing out a 13.5 because it seems like a big line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, 2 scores. I think Vegas is trying to do some fishing here and get people to look at Alabama and say, oh well, the past 3 weeks, they haven't they've lost against the spread the past 3 weeks. This is going to be another week. It's a big line, but I have a feeling that Alabama is probably going to cover here the 13.5. I think this game being played at home really helps them. Obviously, it didn't help them much against South Carolina, but when you look at South Carolina's defense, right, they have an identity on defense, and they do some things pretty well on offense as well. I don't see that from Missouri. I don't see a reason, like you said, I don't see a reason to bet for Missouri. So if you're forcing me to bet on against the spread here, I'm going to take Alabama. I know it's a big line. I know we've seen them struggle, and it's tough to bet Alabama against the spread. I get all that, right? The only thing that would keep me from betting Alabama against the spread here, again, if you force me to bet it, is the fact that Missouri gets a chance to play Alabama, and they get to play that script A, and then they just get up, emotionally. It elevates the team. They have better practice, and they get a chance to do what Vanderbilt did, and that's the reason why. Missouri is able to cover. I really don't feel like Missouri has a chance to win this football game, if I'm being honest. They would need Alabama to have another 15 penalties like they did against Tennessee, not get any turnovers, and then also probably turn the ball over at least once or twice as well, just with the way that this offense is playing for Missouri right now. That's really the only path to victory I would see for Missouri. But right now, I like Alabama to win. I like them to cover. And for the over and under, I would probably bet the under in this one, just because I don't think that Missouri is going to be able to put up a ton of points.